We live in a strange time. It's a strange time where a man with a ring light can sit in front of his computer and have more influence than a man with a congregation. And somehow some people have decided that those two things are the same, and they're not. Power and authority used to travel together, and somehow now they became divorced, and social media got custody of power in the divorce. So you can have a million people listening to you, and nobody actually knows who you are. Nobody can correct you. Nobody can tell you that you're wrong in person, and you still command authority over people, or maybe not authority, but an amplified opinion. So in this conversation, Tim and I dig into that fracture and what it means to have influence without formation, and to have a voice without actually having a relationship with the people who you're speaking into, and reach without any real responsibility or respect to the people who you're engaging with. And we talk about the difference between power and authority, and why the internet rewards imitation over transformation, and why real authority, especially in faith, isn't built on visibility but on proximity. And underneath all of it is a really older idea of this idea of climbing a mountain. That to actually know God, to actually grow, to actually become something more than just a commentator or a critic on truth, you ascend slowly, quietly, with humility, oftentimes out of view of others, not a broadcast, not to brand it, not to create a shortcut. And so the question becomes, what are we actually climbing, or in this life? Are we just watching other people climb and calling it progress? So this conversation is about that tension and what it means to pursue something real in a world that's built on digital appearances. Welcome to the map.
2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff.
Okay, we're live. Thanks again for doing this, Tim. We talked for about 45 minutes before we decided to hit record. So
we did our own personal pre-show, bro. That was what that.
Yeah.
Nothing about at all what we're going to talk about either. Like basically like a 45-minute like brief debrief. You know, like we'll do this. We spoke about nothing that we're going to speak
about. Yeah. So we'll probably have to do like a few of these, but I did a poll and was asking people what kind of topics do you want to hear, and all these are going to be kind of interwoven with each other. But one of the things that has kind of emerged as the internet has came out of its infancy and social media, was birthed and came out of its infancy, is nobody really sees, like, they don't really see any content or things from the people who they follow. So it used to be when you get on social media, you had people on Facebook, you had people on Instagram. And so I'd see like you posting pictures, your wife, your kids, but these platforms now through machine learning just feed people interest. What are you interested in? What are you engaging in? And so it's like, we're supposed to be on these platforms to even engage with each other, which is a very like abstract way to even have any kind of relationship with somebody, to do it digitally. But even that's been kind of taken away. And so one of the topics that people are kind of interested in is who has more authority now, your local pastor who you see in person and what they're saying and doing, or an influencer on the internet who you're following, who maybe tens or hundreds of millions of people follow, who is a theology bro or a personality there. So I wanted to kind of get a take, because obviously you're going to come from a European departure point, which I don't know exactly how.
Europe. We're not Europe, bro. We're Britain. We are standalone.
Okay. The cradle of Western civilization. We're going to hear your hot take on it, but I'll kind of give you the space and give me some of your thoughts on that, and then we'll just talk about the outworkings of that, what that means and the implications of it.
So I'm going to geek out probably straight away. You happy for that? So I'm like, we have to understand the difference between power and authority, So when someone asks like, "Hey, who has more authority?" Like influencers or these people who, like we listen to them, we regurgitate their information. No one learns anything; we just regurgitate stuff, right?
Mhm.
So the idea that you are in a social media feed and you're learning is not real. What happens is that you just take carte blanche to the information that's been given to you, and you end up regurgitating that information. It becomes your own information, not your own learning. So I think it's a really important point. But actually, I don't know if we can have this conversation about understanding the left hand and right hand. So the strong right hand of God, specifically biblically, is this idea that it's his power. It's his power to trample or obstruct or stop or favor or promote or whatever it is. A strong right arm of the Lord. If you want to do a Bible study, strong right arm of God, strong right arm of the Lord. And it's normally associated with power. Left hand is authority. And the authority is a really interesting dynamic and that's why in Britain, we have queens, kings, and they hold the scepter,
Mhm.
that right hand and left hand. So one of the things that's really important is that power and authority are meant to go together. Social media, in my view, has disrupted that unity and torn it apart. So now loads of people have loads of power but very little authority, because power can be seized, but authority can only be given. And so when we think about like the social media aspect of this, when we are consuming information on social media, we are giving people power over us, and they are influencing us, and they are almost seizing power. Now we're involved in that to some extent, but when we just like absorb and doom scroll and all the rest of it, we end up actually disempowering ourselves, our own minds, our own thought processes, and we end up being people who regurgitate information. So we're suddenly like powerless sheep, we just kind of do exactly what people tell us to do or say we should believe or whatever. And then we get fed the same information over and over and over again, to the algorithmic aspect of that. And so all of a sudden we're like, oh, wow, yeah, I never realized like I was a left-wing fundamentalist or a right-wing Nazi. Like I never realized that this was my core belief or my core value. And now this must be who I am. It's like, no, you just gave all your power away to some nut job online. That's what happened. And then the nut job online has friends who then their algorithms come in, and then you see all this information, and that's not authority. So people don't have authority on the basis that they have influence, because I don't think you can ever really have authority in someone's life unless you have a relationship with them, but also unless you are given authority from above or from here. So there's authority that comes from above, and there's authority that comes from relationship horizontally between two people. And so my suggestion would be is that when you understand the nature of power and disempowerment, not from like a crazy like Michel Foucault crime and punishment angle, but just these general concepts, what happens is that you understand that, at least for me, I understand that the power dynamic becomes the elevation of a view over my view on the basis that I submit to that view, not even really knowing that it's authoritative. Whereas with authority, actually, it comes to relationship, it comes through divine providence in some respects, in terms of who God gives authority to, from a Christian perspective. And what I would say is that if we're having a conversation about who has more influence, there is no doubt that people online have more influence. If we're having a conversation about who has more authority in people's lives in terms of discipleship, for example, I would still say that the reality shifts the other way, back to like pastors or people that have genuine interest. Now, when those pastors reject their pastoral responsibility and prioritize their influence on their social media, then you've got a whole different set of issues, because you have someone who is laying down authority to pick up power, and then they wield that power and seize that power. And we're not going to talk about this, apparently. We're not going to talk about this, but that's what happens in charismatic neo-Pentecostal circles, especially in mega churches like Bethel, who I love and have loved for a long time and have a lot of support for. But when you are overemphasizing influence and underemphasizing authority, what you do is you become someone who is powerful but does not have the authority to wield that power properly, and then you get into all sorts of trouble and become abusive. That's what happens. You can't get around it. Anyway, that was my 5-minute rant. How about you, Michael?
Well, I think you brought up a few different points on power and authority, and then around being discipled and around how information is kind of consumed. And I remember I have a close friend of mine named Alexander who lives in Geneva, Switzerland. And he studied in Rome, did a theological study in Rome, and then he did a philosophical study in Tel Aviv. And part of his study is he went and actually sat under rabbis. And so he would sit with the, full on, everybody has the Jew curls and beard and everything. He's just this Swiss French guy there. But he'd said the way that they would learn is the rabbi would come in and he would pose one single question and then leave. And so you have a group, you're learning in a community of people, and the rabbi's posing a question, and usually it's often a disarming kind of simple question. And then he leaves, and you have a week to figure out. And so it's actually the going through the process of discovery within yourself. And so the internet is like, and AI is the opposite of that. We genuinely are letting something else think for us, and to your point, memorizing and regurgitating information. But the process of trying to figure out the answer to the question is more important than the answer often. There's actually a story I think it's in Chinese folklore about the Monkey King. Do you know the story? Okay. So for people who don't know, just a very brief version of it is that there's this divine being of chaos who gets created. It's a little monkey who falls from the heavens in a stone egg. He grows up. It's what Dragon Ball Goku is actually based off of. But he has a staff that extends unendingly, and he has superpowers. He can transform anything. He can ride clouds, whatever. He ends up fighting the heavens, like heavenly beings, and he gets imprisoned. And then a monk who wants enlightenment comes to him and frees him from this prison that he's been in for 500 years. And so he says, I want to go on this journey to enlightenment to get this secret scroll. And so they go on the journey together. And at the end of the journey, they get to where the scroll is, and they open it up, and there's nothing on it. And then they get the understanding of like, the journey gave us all the answers that we were actually looking for, all the sacrifice, everything we had to do to get here. And so circling back to the rabbi story. So one week, the rabbi comes to Alex. He says, to the group, not to Alex, but to the group. He said, why do you suppose that God talks to people on mountaintops? And leaves. And so they're all like, well, they're opening up the scriptures and they're talking, dialoguing. So to ruin it for everybody, to do the exact opposite of what I just said, he comes back the next week and he says, the reason why God meets people on mountaintops is because you have to climb them. So we're conditioned to go to the internet, to the oracle of all of our whims, and go to ChatGPT and go to an influencer, go to our YouTube algorithm that is tailored around our interests to curate information for us that it thinks that we want to keep us engaged as long as possible. Why? Because you're the product and they make money off of your attention. They give you ads and they're making money off that. It's not for your benefit, but my point is, climbing a mountain means you have to step outside of, it's a pattern break. You have to step outside the everyday goings of life. And if you want true transcendence and true alignment, and people sometimes, in Protestant Christianity, we've over kind of personalized God in a Western sense of like, when I go to Walmart and I can get any kind of Oreos that I want, I can get mint Oreos, peanut butter Oreos, whatever. And they're like, what I just love about Jesus, Tim, is he talks to me when I put my slippers on in the morning and when I'm drinking my coffee. And sometimes people take this to an extreme where they delude themselves a bit. I remember I was in a church, and when October 7th happened, this is like kind of a crazy story, but October 7th happened, right? In Israel, all this stuff happened. There was a lady who was there on a group doing a tourist tour of the Holy Lands. And she was talking about how scared she was. And then like while they were in like a bunker somewhere, like somebody was handing off specific kinds of sandwiches or some kind of food. And she's like, that happened to be my favorite one. I just thought to myself, like, the Lord knows what I need. He just wants me to be comforted, right? I'm like, you're delusional. Like, you think that life is that much about you. Like, while people are literally, their bodies are being dismembered and rape and murder is going on right outside of where you're at, you think that God is hyperfixated on giving you the same. So people have deluded themselves into thinking that it's all about them. And so when we have the humility to step outside of ourselves and climb a mountain, it's not safe to climb a mountain, and it's not safe to meet God on top of a mountain. I know, like, from an Orthodox perspective, Jonathan Brazil and Jordan Peterson have talked about how religion protects people from divine encounters, basically, like in a positive sense. Like, it's creating a barrier, like where you see in the temple, if people go into the Holy of Holies, they die. And so we've went to an extreme where there's nowhere. Anyways, I'm on a rant, but my point is that how we perceive wisdom and how we perceive transcendence, to agree with you, is I absorb information, I regurgitate that information, and I accumulate that and get higher and higher and higher, but I don't change anything about my life. And Rich Mullins once said, I am not what I believe, I am what I believe is doing to me.
Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you do get higher and higher and higher. I think you're getting lower and lower and lower. Because I think that the more
perception wise is okay, I have a bank and I'm dumping information in the bank and, like, look how much I know, but my head's getting bigger, but my heart's getting smaller, like the Grinch.
And it goes back, for me at least, it goes back like to the very beginning, you know, like, so from a Christian worldview point of view, and actually from the all monotheistic worldview point of view, but the reality is that Eden, so the garden of, not my daughter, Eden is a walled garden at the top of a mountain, right? And Adam is given dominion over a specific arena at a specific point in the creation, which is paradise. And it's not paradise because somehow it is created in perfection compared to the rest of creation. It's paradise on the basis that he has the opportunity to walk with the one who can bring him into a state of oneness with himself, i.e. in the cool of the day, you can walk with God in the cool of the day. And what happens is that, so for me, it's a fascinating thing, because the idea that you would then circumvent that relational dynamic of walking in the cool of the day with the Father in order to become like him. The way that you do that is that you try and become God without God. This is Saint Athanasius, and there's various different aspects of this, but you try and become God without God, right? And what happens is that you try and circumvent, that might be the right word, circumnavigate, whatever the right word is, the long process of walking for eternity with God, climbing the mountain, because you're climbing the mountain with God, you're going higher with him, and you're like, do you know what? Actually, I'm just too tired. I've got this amount of stuff going on in my life. I can't really be bothered with this or whatever. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the tree of the knowledge of good and evil and basically, like, short circuit the process and become divine in my mind, become the person that I've always known that I should be, because you actually are meant to be divinely minded. We have the mind of Christ. That's the purpose or one of the purposes of his coming. And we short circuit that process, and what that means is that the Reformed tradition is a little bit off on this from my perspective, because we often see that the true knowledge of good and evil is the ultimate temptation. Like, this is the temptation of God. It's like, well, the temptation isn't the tree. The temptation is to disobey, right? So right. The temptation is not the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The temptation is to believe the lie from the snake, the serpent, the devil. We can talk all about that if you want to. Believe the lie that you are not like God and can become like God in a quicker way than he's letting you do it. And he knows that you'll become like him, and so he's actually scared of you, right? So, I mean, there's all sorts of lies in that 3 lines. It's a phenomenal book, like, in terms of the amount of information that is packed into Genesis 1, 2, and 3. But so what we do is that instead of climbing the mountain, we end up trying to walk downhill. And we end up walking down to the depths, and we end up creating God in our image rather than becoming like God in his image. And that, what you're talking about, the idea of false transcendence, in a sense, becoming transcendent in what the Bible calls aloof and lofty ideas, right? This is exactly what Paul is talking about. Is because we're unwilling to climb the mountain, we're unwilling to approach Eden, we're unwilling to approach God, we're unwilling to approach the sacrifice and the death that will cause us, because you can't stand face to face with God and not die. You know? And we can talk about Moses at some point if you want to, and why he doesn't, or anyway, blah blah blah. But actually, the entire social media aspect of what we're talking about is just a re-navigation in modernity of the original problem. The original problem of sin, the original problem of circumnavigating a way of becoming divinely minded, you know. And for me, I'm like, we just do the same things over and over and over again. And I think, like, when we think about AI, this is the last thing I'll say, and then jump Michael back in. But when we think about AI, the best way I've heard it described, it might have been Jonathan Pageau, but I don't know. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe this is me. Maybe I'm just a freaking genius. This is the best way to describe it. Is like Sauron from Lord of the Rings. It's just this massive eye, right? You've probably heard this, right? It's probably not me that's made it up. So Michael was nodding. He knows, so it's not just me, guys. So it's Sauron that's like middle of in the eye, in the middle of Mordor, in the middle of hell, middle of death, and he needs people to embody him. You know, like, so he's not embodied; he's disembodied. And what that means is that AI is looking, and this is the danger of it, is looking for people to embody what it thinks. And well, I'm not going to go conspiracy on this. That's not the point of this conversation. But then if we just take a step back, influencers are looking for you to embody what they think. Because as far as you're concerned, they may not, it could be like an AI fictional character that you're most obsessed with. There's all this stuff, like, it may or may not be real. But whatever that is doing, whatever you're perceiving, it doesn't have an embodied nature. It has a nature of ethereal digitalism, but it doesn't have a body. And it's looking for you to embody it. And I think that is a twist and a perverting, of the original design, that we were meant to embody the incarnate. We were meant to embody the spirit. So, man, I don't know if you know about like Nephilim rituals, or if you know about anything to do with like how like pagans in the Near East used to invite spirits in. What they used to do was on the body, and then they had this unmouthing ceremony where they would breathe into the mouth and into the nostrils, and then the spirit would come and reside in that. And they would dress it, they would feed it, and then they would control that idol, or that there would be like a give and take with that idol, where, you know, if we feed you, give us rain. That was the part of it. In the creation stories, that is completely flipped around, where God doesn't create an idol, he creates a human. Just Adam, which means humankind. And he breathes into the nostrils his spirit into Adam. So it's the exact opposite. Man doesn't create God and control God. God creates man to reflect his image, and we then walk up the mountain to be with him. So, and I mean, I could go through like an insane number of how the Jews invert pagan worship. I haven't got time to do it now. The purpose of the inversion is specifically because we want to sacrifice ourselves, empty ourselves to allow him in, as opposed to fill something with us. That's what Islam does fundamentally, in terms, and all unitary monotheism basically creates God in their image. And so, anyway, there's lots of that. But I'm saying what you're saying about false transcendence is literally, on social media, is literally the problem. Genesis 1, 2, and 3.
But this is like a side note. It's funny that you bring this up, but I know that I was watching this documentary, and I seen that there's a form of Tibetan Buddhism. It's a sect of Tibetan Buddhism where they will do this thing called the Divine Banquet, and they'll use a human skull as a bone, as a bowl, and then they use a human thigh bone as a flute. And so they'll play on it, and they'll go to places that are known to like where spirits dwell. Sometimes it's bogs or graveyards or caves or whatever, like spiritual places. And they'll call these spirits to come. And basically what they'll do is, like, through visualization and meditation, they're emptying themselves out, like all that they are. into this bowl, and they're inviting these spirits to come and consume them. And there's a term in Tibetan. It's again a form of, you could go through reincarnation or these like long journey, or you can do this, and it's a way to subvert or fast track. But there's a term within Tibetan Buddhism of basically where these people lose their minds, they go crazy. When this happens, they crack, and some of them die. Actually, from going through this. Anyways, all I have to say, when you say it's inverted, like you're inviting spirits to come eat you, and then God goes and lets us eat his body. But
dude, if you want to talk about communion and the Eucharist in that context, we can do that.
Later, just to wrap up the point. So, like, I think again, this is about perception of kind of like what words mean, and I'll just circle back to, I think that in Western culture specifically, and the way their school system is, it is very much about, I will tell you what to think, you absorb that information, and then I'll create a testing system on, can you regurgitate that information back to me, and you are like higher, you're above like your other peers, even though that has nothing to do with wisdom per se. And your recounting of the creation story, I really, there's a joke, but I really would have wanted Eve to just say to the devil, he's like, if you eat this fruit, you'll be like God. He's like, okay, you eat it first.
Right.
Because he already know. So I think one of the things that one of the things I've learned as I gotten older is forgetting is a sin. Forgetting things is actually a sin. Forgetting things actually positions you to miss the mark, to make mistakes, to like have failure in your life. It's forgetting things that are true, things that are good, things that are right. And so in the creation narrative, the devil's like, well, if you want to be like God, and like when you read that narrative, it says God created man, and there's a benediction that said, and he said, it is good. And so if the creator of everything that exists makes something, and then he like signs off on it, like there's nothing really else for me to add to it, you lack nothing in the intention of the creator. And so the devil is saying, like, you do this, and you can be even better than what you are, or different than what you are, but you're forgetting who you are. So the initial fall is to your point, I believe the lie about who I am, and out of that, then I enter into a system of like trying to curate for myself a transcendent experience. And I think like when I look at like the scriptures that are prophesying about the coming of Christ, they're saying there's nothing about him to make men turn their heads. And I think in retrospect for us, like when we see media around like the Gospel of John or The Chosen or whatever, it's filmed in a way that is very attractional. I'm like, there was just something about Jesus, wasn't there? And like I remember hearing people talk about that. There was like, Jesus told them guys, he said, you drop your nets and you come follow me. And there was just something about Jesus where they did it. And I was like, well, Scripture's saying actually there wasn't anything physically about his appearance to make men turn their heads or look at him. He was ambiguous in that sense. And I think it's so interesting because that's the exact opposite to your point of people who maybe have a call of God in their life, maybe not. Maybe they're just like great businessmen and marketers who find themselves in these positions of leadership, but they're going to lay down like their responsibility to do life with people and disciple people and go narrow and deep, and maybe have like an impact that's narrow and deep with 2 or 3 people, and try to go shallow and broad and have hundreds of people there. And they're basing it off of how can I get people to perceive me? It's perceived value, right? Like, and I did like e-commerce for a period of time, helping people market, and you really like to sell products online that have very little weight. This is very like, this is really good. I don't realize how good it was till I started saying it. So everybody start taking notes. You want to sell products online that have very little weight. They don't weigh anything and have high perceived value. These are the best products you could sell online, guys, from an e-commerce perspective, meaning jewelry. I can make a little piece of metal and I could, oh, it's artisan, it's this. The words that I attach to that piece of metal increase your perceived value of that thing. Literally, where something is $5 to make, I sell it for $150 and it weighs nothing to ship it. And so my profit margins are like exponential there, right? And so that's kind of like what I see happening with influencers. They great orators, where they're very flashy, they present themselves in a certain way. And Christ is really the antithesis of the devil as well, in the sense of the devil is an angel of light. He comes to, like, he's very attractional. He comes to deceive us. And so Paul writes that we shouldn't regard each other anymore from earthly standards. Like, you shouldn't just look at somebody with your eyeballs and then put them in a box of like what they are. You should and the only way really to discern who somebody is to be with them in person and spend some time with them. How are you with your wife? How are you with your kids? Like, after I've been with you for an amount of time, I could start unraveling who is actually Tim. And from there, then through that, you not asserting it on me, but you will have more authority to speak into my life. If you say, hey,
Correct.
Mike, I'm observing this about your marriage, and like, is everything okay? If I don't have that with you, you have no authority to speak into my life, you know?
Even if you're like in a position of leadership.
Yeah.
Because even the positional leadership model that we often see in the context of church is that the leaders believe that they should have authority over your life, and there is a God-given authority. So if I believe that you are called in this moment to be the leader of this church, and I'm part of your church, I'm submitting to that authority. But you don't actually have the authority to tell me what to do or to challenge me necessarily. You have the authority in terms of being able to have the authority of the navigation of where the church is going and the vision and all that sort of stuff. Although, I mean, if you think about the idea of church vision and you apply that to anybody apart from charismatic neo-Pentecostals, it makes no sense. Because why would you need a vision for a church? The church is defined as it is. You know, like we know what the church is. Just get out of the way and just do what the Bible says. Anyway, whatever. But like, actually, you might have the authority in terms of you can, I don't know, like, do confession or do whatever else it is, but there's a depth of authority that can only come if you have relationship that isn't positional and that isn't hierarchical and that isn't religious in that sense. Well, I think that we have to be really aware of that, and then we also have to know that leaders don't have to have authority over us in terms of how we live our lives. I've had leaders in my life who I love and I cherish them and they're amazing, but they have core values that are completely different to my core values.
Yeah.
They're like, we will miss our children's birthday to go to this conference because this is the most important thing. Fine,
Right.
whatever, like, no worries. Well, I don't hold that core value. I'm like, I want to be at my kid's birthday. I think it's probably slightly dysfunctional that you don't want to be at your kid's birthday, or at least it's not the priority in that moment. And I think, like, for me, I don't give them authority to dictate how I am functioning in my core value of wanting to see my kid on their birthday. But I am giving them authority in my life to say, hey, I submit to your leadership in this context. And I think we have to be really clear about the difference between those things. Otherwise, you end up in a cult. You know, like,
Yeah.
that's what happens. Like, you end up saying, okay, well, the leader has authority in this situation, which means they have authority in all situations, which means that I must grow my hair this long, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. You know.
Well, I think that's kind of the dynamic of people. So when Paul is dealing with the Corinthians had this kind of culture about them where they would follow speakers like sports teams. So they would kind of figure out, like, oh, Tim is very passionate when he speaks, and this other speaker is very like logical in how they speak. And so when Paul writes this thing, some say they're of Apollos, some say they're this person, some say they're this person. He's saying, I didn't come to you with eloquence of speech. Some Protestants will just take it and be like, we just got to talk real plain. We don't want that learned talk. That's not what he's saying. What he's saying is, I'm only following one person. I remember I saw this clip of Denzel Washington, like they were asking him something. He was like, I only follow one person. That's Jesus Christ. I ain't following nobody else. You know, saying this. And so, but people get in this mode of like, who's the best of the best of the best. And I want to follow that person. And then I'll to a degree model, but that, to your point, in reality, there's going to be like compartments of life where that person has no authority to speak into your life. And again, I remember hearing this analogy, but Lewis said, I want God, not my idea of God. And so then when we try to model that out and like frame that out, it's like, well, what standard are we going to use for that? And if I use the standard that my dad set, or I use the standard that my pastor set, or my favorite influencer set, it would be like if I'm on a construction site and I cut a 6-foot board, and then I use the new board that I cut to measure the next board, and I take the newly cut board and use it to measure the next board. I take the newly cut board and measure. By the time I cut 80 boards, I went from having a 6-foot board to an 8-foot board. And so in Scripture, it says Christ is the cornerstone. So when you set the cornerstone, it does define the parameters of the building. Once that stone is set and I start laying stones out from it, it's going to define what that looks like. And so Jesus saying those who want to save their life have to lose it, and those who want to lose their life is going to save it. I have to lay down a bunch of things and then ask him, what are the parameters of what my life looks like? So in the same vein of thought, if I want God, not my idea of God, do you want the life that God has for you, or do you want the life that you think that God has for you?
Right.
And when you do that, you can only do that from the source. You can't do that through influencers and people who are telling you this is the Christian life. But when you're around, and because again, just to be clear, anything that's on the internet is to extract money from you. Nearly almost anything, just to be clear. Like if somebody has they've invested money and time and energy of it to make, except for me. I don't monetize this, I don't gain money from this. So just to be clear. But
Yeah,
you're seeing
same as Mike Winger, man. You're the Mike Winger hero that doesn't monetize any of his YouTube.
So the issue is that if it's there, it's gonna make money off of it. So when I'm in a community of people, it's like people who love me, they're not trying to manipulate, control, intimidate, seduce me with something, but they're like genuinely, hey, let's build each other up there, and they love me enough to tell me the truth. And not, some people love you, but the devil will tell you something that'll tickle your ear. It'll make you feel good. And if you're always feeling good from the things that you're hearing from people around you, they don't love you. They might love the way that you make them feel, and they're trying to get you to love the way that they make you feel, but they don't love you. If all the time it's always like good thing, if you've never been confronted, if you've never had anybody push back on a decision you've made, if you've never had anybody, and people, there's mechanisms online where these people who are influencers will, like, there's some term I seen, I don't remember what it is, but basically it's where people cut their families out of their lives completely. I don't remember what it's called. But basically, like, there was a group that met, like, yeah, so it's been 2 years since I don't talk to my parents at all anymore. And I'm like, okay, there's always like the exception to the rule and the rule. And so everybody's like, yeah, but you don't know what happened in my life. And I'm like, fair. But I think that's a really not a helpful mechanism to normalize. I will just like make the choice to cut people out of my life forever. Because some of the people who I have in my life who cause me a fair amount of stress and a fair amount of problems are people who, like, I'll just use an example. Maybe I perceive that my parents are causing me stress, but then I reflect on how much stress that I've caused them and the things that I've done. So there's like a tension between there. And so if I get in the mode of just cutting people out, again, I'm trying to curate a life for myself. And so it's ultimately just comes down to, hey, God, like, are you inviting me to love Tim in this moment? Are you inviting me to, anyways, I'm going on a rant. I'll let you.
No, but I think it's right. Cause I think in the end, I mean, I was trying to look it up quickly. I couldn't find it. I think it's Sukkot, the Feast of Tabernacles, or maybe it might not be that. So I'm sorry if it isn't, but the Jews used to leave their civilization and go and live in tents, I think for a month. I've got that wrong, but you can look it up. Mm-hmm. In order that they did not forget what it was like to live in the wilderness. Mm-hmm. Like that's what they did. There was a command to have a season for everybody where they would not forget where they came from. and they would not forget the pain and the hardship of their ancestors, but also for other people that are enslaved in that way, or whatever, or were in the wilderness, or whatever it was. And I think that there's something very important, and this is the spiritual act of fasting, or whatever, any sort of ascetic principle, silence, like whatever it is, because it's basically being able to say, like, no, I live a life of comfort. And even though I live a life where most people don't really want to say that I'm doing something wrong, and that makes me feel really good, because actually it's super easy. Like, it's a really easy way to live my life, where I have the TV that I can turn on, and I have the social media that I can scroll through, and I have whatever it might be. But the whole purpose of that is that when the Jews got to the point where they were so comfortable, God was like, hey, you need to remember discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
You have to remember that. And so so the question is, for anybody, including us, are we willing to take the discomfort of the journey up the mountain to actually meet God, or are we way too comfortable on our sofas, right? And I think that there is something really powerful, that the journey towards God always involves you dying to some degree, and sometimes we think that people are. So I'm talking about friends here, right? I'm not talking about leaders who abuse. I'm talking about friends. Sometimes we think that this idea that a friend, that correction from a friend is a slap in the face, or like that's just paraphrased from the psalm or the proverb rather. But we sometimes take that as an attack on us. It's like, well, actually, if they're your friend, they're not attacking you. They're trying to love you, and the journey up the mountain includes those things. Otherwise, you don't become anything. So the whole point about Adam in the garden is that he isn't created perfect. He's created with the potential for perfection. He's not created in his perfect state. He's not. He's sinless, but he's not perfect. You can't conflate the two. Reformed theology does this quite a lot. So Adam is created sinless, but he isn't created perfect, because perfection's impossible, right? And you have to grow to the point of perfection. You have to be tested, and then you pass the test and become more perfect than you were. So there's always grades and steps forward. And so if we are only ever who we are now, we are only ever being, we're not becoming. But Adam was created to be and to become. So if we are content with who we are in the here and now, and we don't want to become someone greater, more perfect, more divinely minded, whatever you want to say, we've completely missed the point of our existence. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, Western culture, social media is a part of that, but Western culture thrives from you not being who you're meant to be, and not becoming who you're meant to become. Exactly right.
Dissatisfaction. Marketing and marketing and sales is based around creating dissatisfaction. It's called creating the gap, right? And so there's Paradise Island and there's Hell Island. There's where somebody's at, and you're convincing them that they're on Hell Island, and you convince them that you have Paradise Island on some level or degree. And so you create that dissatisfaction, which convinces them to take action and get off of Hell Island, so to speak. And I think just tying a bow on what we're talking about, if there'll be people who come and present and act as stand-ins to give us wisdom. So the devil is coming in the creation narrative like, hey, you can, it's always like, do it fast. You can get it done fast. You can eat this fruit and be like God. And the reality is there's people who will cosplay the prophet. They will cosplay a Christian. They're wearing a costume, and they're proclaiming to be on your team, so to speak. And people really want to have a team. They want to really belong to somebody. And Jesus said to his disciples, he said, beware the leaven of Herod and the Pharisees. And you can't really tell if you mix in, the yeast with the bread. You can't tell until things start bubbling that something is off. It's like been mixed in there. It's the same thing with the parable. Jesus gives multiple parables of like the darnel wheat or the bastard wheat, where a rival farmer comes in to another rival's farm and his enemy, I don't know if it's a rival farmer, is his enemy, and he comes in and he throws a bunch of seed in with the wheat that he's planted, and those plants will grow up and they look exactly the same, but you only can tell the difference when the actual wheat is supposed to be produced, because the darnel wheat will have no wheat. And so what's it doing? It's robbing nutrients and it's taking up space there, but in a natural sense, you're looking at it and you can't tell. And so that would just be my observation, is that, treading lightly with people who we see online but know nothing about, of like taking what they're saying and implementing it, because they could be very much like just masquerading or live action role playing a Christian, because people get satisfied with like, well, if you say you believe what I believe, I have power of agreement. That makes me feel significant, and that makes me feel good about what's happening here. And I look at Paul, and Paul is saying, imitate me as I imitate Christ. Well, how does he imitate Christ? Galatians 2:20, the life I live, I don't exist anymore. There is no Paul. I've been co-crucified with Christ. The life I now live is Christ living through me. I'm going to be an avatar of God moving through my life. So here's a guy who's saying, yeah, come and imitate me. I don't exist anymore. So they're pointing people to Jesus. So again, if people are not trying to point people to the author of salvation and the creator of everything that exists, and like the Denzel statement, I don't follow anybody, I just follow Jesus. Like that's where people need to be pointing people, and that can be a kind of litmus test of sorts.
Yeah, and I think so. I mean, I don't know if I agree that Paul is saying I don't exist anymore, but I understand what you're saying. It's that Christ is so present within him that he is living as him, but presenting as Christ, and that's the purpose of it. Because the joining of Christ and people is a really important aspect of that. Mm-hmm. But then just to go back to I'm just trying to tie a bow on it, right? But the marketing piece from Hell Island to Paradise Island, right? It is an inversion of the truth. It's a perversion of the truth, because actually we do want people to become different and move from where they are and become something that they're not yet. But we don't do that by buying stuff, or we don't do that by regurgitate information that we hear online, or whatever else it is. We actually do that by walking up the mountain. Mm-hmm. So marketing is basically trying to convince you on a very basic level that you're in the wrong place. Mm-hmm. And actually, there's nothing specifically wrong with that as a principle, because we are all in the wrong places. We're not yet the perfected selves that we're called to be. But it's a perversion of that principle, because it basically says that you will find happiness in our island that we created, as opposed to happiness in Eden or the mountaintop. Mm-hmm. But so I think like there's lots there, and this thing with Denzel Washington as well. Like, I only follow Jesus, yeah, kind of, but I also follow the people that embody him. So I think like that for me is where those two, the Paul thing and the Denzel thing come together. Because Denzel is like, I don't follow anybody. I'm like, cool. Like, I understand the principle there, and that is ultimately where we should be. We should be walking towards where we are reliant on Christ. But also, in our journeys, we need people that reflect Christ to us, and we follow them for a season, or we follow them for a lifetime, or whatever it might be, in order that we can understand about Christ embodied on earth and what that can actually look like. It's why saints are really important. It's why church fathers are really important, because we look to them. And I mean, oh man, I mean, we could talk about veneration and iconography right now if you want to, but like the idea behind those things in Orthodox and Catholic circles, more Orthodox and Catholic, because Catholics take it on a bit of a weird bent, is that you are looking into the future of who you are yet to become, and actually these saints have become their perfected selves as a result of them climbing the mountain.
They're more alive than we are. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And there's something very powerful about that. And actually, if you would like my very personal opinion on what happened in Bethel, I think they have a very poor theology of iconography. Mm-hmm. Because I think what happened is that people worship Bill and Chris. Mm-hmm. And most likely they received that worship. Mm-hmm. And my gut would be is that if we had a difference between in our understanding of what iconography is meant for. In other, we all have icons. We all have people that we venerate or celebrate, or celebrity is a crazy example of that because it's so perverse. But we all have icons in our lives, the people that we look up to, the people we're like, wow, look, you have done this.
Mhm.
Like CEO of a millionaire, what's it called? Secret Diary of a Millionaire, whatever it is. I don't know what it is. You're like amazing, and I want to become like you. They become an icon. The problem is you worship it. And the problem is when you give worship to something and that thing receives worship, you've become you completely you've disintegrated the natural order of worship. So for me, what's happened is that Bill and Chris have created a culture which is amazing, but they've also created a culture in which, and with Danny Silk's culture of honor stuff, I think, and Unpunishable particularly, they've created something where they've actually received worship from people. And I mean, we've both been in that school where you're like, Bill could do no wrong. You have a 10-minute standing ovation. And Bill's lovely. I've had one-on-one time with Bill and Chris and Dan. And they're lovely, amazing people. But when you don't understand that people are worshipping you, you receive that in some way, even inadvertently, you've basically got a problem. Because what's happened is you've created a culture that means that you are the icon, that you are not just the icon, you're the God. And that becomes very iffy, especially, no offense, American listeners, in American culture, because American culture is specifically celebrities at this moment.
Yeah, we try to follow like success stories and leaders. So let me just walk back what I'm saying like about the Denzel piece is I'm specifically framing it that there's a standard that we're going to follow, and the standard is going to be like Christ is the cornerstone. Of course, like I have the same mentor now. Someone who speaks to my life since 2008. We've walked like he discipled me when I first became a Christian. Jim Kelly's his name. I did podcasts with him, and I still call him like, hey, like this is what I'm doing. Like I respect your opinion. There's something going on with my dad or something's going on in my family. Like, what do you think about this? And I listen, I absorb it, I take it in. I'm always holding it in tension. Like it's not the absolute, but I 100% believe that we need people who are farther ahead of us in life in certain areas, who are going to save us unnecessary suffering and pain. And the whole idea of ironing sharpen iron is like a very cliche and cheesy thing that's kind of said sometimes, but it really means like me and Tim we're going to rub against each other, and chunks and pieces of us are going to fly off. Sparks are going to fly. It's going to be heat and friction.
And it's going to hurt.
It's going to hurt. Yeah. So I think that's 100% part of the Christian life. And I think, again, I just can't emphasize enough that people need to be around. There is no substitution of being within community with people and having them integrated in your life and doing life. There's that, like, you're deluding yourself if you think that you can go off and get what you need from, internet land, and absorb it. So
if you're a leader.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a leader.
Yeah. You need,
because often leaders don't bring that around them because they're the leader of an organization. If everyone says yes, and there's no sharply on.
If it's very personality based, like what you're talking about, if it's very personality based, you have to uphold the brand. And so upholding the brand means that there can't be any defects or anything wrong. And one of the things I did respect about Rich Mullins as he toured was he would show up to churches and he would start this, the people want a very polished presentation, whatever. So Rich would show up and he would publicly confess sin. And he was open about the fact how much he struggled with loneliness. And sometimes he did struggle with drinking or whatever it was. And he would publicly confess sin. And he was like always trying to dismantle this persona that people would try to build up with him. Now, I think that you could maybe take that to a place of like basically giving permission, like not to like change per se in a way, but I do respect it because of the time that we live in where everybody wants everybody else to think only good things about them. And I want for myself, like just to authentically like be changing, be growing, and just take a legitimate audit. When tax time comes, it doesn't matter what you want. It matters like how much money did you make, how much money you spent, like what's going on. So taking an audit of things, I think in that circle of people, within like that ethos of like charismatic Christianity, one of the things that that kind of rises to the surface is people, again, like perceived value of like the term of like anointing. So how much magical powers does somebody have granted from them from God? And there's kind of belief systems that will unfold out of that in regards to like, well, proximity is power. So if I'm around you and you have the magical powers and I'm in close proximity to you, that can kind of rub off on me. And if you lay hands on me, you can impart. And so there, in the timing, because I'm looking back again, like to 2008 till now. So I'm looking back at that time of in mainstream evangelical Christianity in America, the Holy Spirit was all but forgotten predominantly outside maybe like in Pentecostal holiness circles or Assemblies of God or Church of God circles. But when you talk about Methodist, Baptist, Presbyterian, etc., like the Church of Christ are sensationalists, and some individual churches of Christ even believe that the Holy Spirit doesn't even dwell within believers. He dwells in the Bible. And so all of your Christian life is surmounted in when you read the Bible, the Holy Spirit in the Bible illuminates the scriptures, and then you're transformed by the renewing of your mind. So if you have Down syndrome or you can't read, it's an issue of like transcendence, in that belief system for me. But all that being said is like you see people who were looking at the scriptures. If you look at New Testament Christianity, if you remove everything that's supernatural from New Testament Christianity, you have effectively cut out roughly around 45% of the New Testament. And you see a group of people who make an observation that the church has went without things for so long, and so there's a kind of a polarizing reaction and a higher value around how do we cultivate and steward these things that we went without for so long, and because of that, we have to give permission and leniency to things that just wasn't good. Like you need character, you need people, and again, when I think about growth, the idea of growth, and one of the things that becomes more and more attractive to me around Orthodoxy is their perspective is, oh, you want to be part of our church? Come and hang out with us for a while and see if you feel that way after a long time, versus like being seeker friendly, versus like, how can I create this attractional aspect of it? It's like, we're not trying to be like an exclusive club here, but like come because the Christian life is a medicine. And many Western people want to think purely in legal terms of just like, I'm in, I'm out, I'm guilty, I'm free, I'm saved, I'm unsaved, I'm believe, I'm unbeliever. And it's just like an absolute of things. And it's like, no, we're all in some kind of like spectrum, and God is working in our lives, and the Christian life is medicine, and it's meant to heal us, and that healing may take decades or entire lifetime to happen in certain areas. So I think like being far removed time wise of like being in Northern California, I appreciate again what was deposited in my life in a lot of ways. With the guy, I don't know if you ever heard of a guy named Mark Verkler. Mark Verkler is a kind of an obscure guy, but he wrote a book called 4 Keys to Hear God's Voice. And I think he come from a cessationalist background, so he's a very logical, intellectual thinker. Anybody who's listening to this, go read the book. The audio version, the audio quality is very bad. But if you read the book, it's very good, very, very simple. But it's a good entry point for people who come from like sensationalist backgrounds or backgrounds where we don't know who the guy is. So I partnered that book with The Forgotten God by Francis Chan, because Francis Chan kind of like went on his own journey, not quite of sensationalism, but definitely from a mainline perspective. But yeah, I don't know, man. I think again, people are people. I've always like kind of held, and I've been in enough like seen scandals and seen things play out from a young age where I just know that if I see anybody, everybody's got some skeletons in their closets. Everybody has ego. Everybody is going to fail at some point. There's going to be some kind of failing. Like that's throughout scripture. We see people failing. So I don't really understand, like when I see tons and tons of outrage, like this ruined my life because this person like fell down. I'm like, you built your house on something other than a rock, right, bro. You built your house on some kind of weird belief system, because I always just, it's like, as much as I love you, and there's things that you'll say that like I'll just, oh, that's a good idea. I'll take it. It's not like I'm building my future and my perspective on, oh, Tim told me this one thing, and like now if that's not true, then like I'm
Right.
I personally don't understand that but
Well, and I mean, I'll go. I mean, we can go rogue here, and I'm not a Rob Bell fan, but when he wrote Velvet Elvis and he talked about faith being a trampoline and a platform which you spring from as opposed to a brick wall, it's really important, because actually, if you look at anybody who grows up in Christianity in the last 30, 40 years, they get given a brick wall, and then someone knocks one brick out, the whole wall comes tumbling down. Normally at university, where secular humanism kind of like finds its way in because you've been protected from it for such a long time. And I think that's a really important thing. But so when I'm saying about like the issues in leadership, there is also an equal issue in participation, because you offer worship without knowing you're worshipping. And it's a major problem, because what happens is that we, like, if you like, I mean, I have no idea what your audience is going to be here, but if you look at Donald Trump as an example, your far hardcore MAGA regretting guys, whatever it is, they cannot hear that Donald Trump has done anything negative at all.
Right.
They can't hear it, because actually, if you take out that piece, then the aura of perfection, of completely what God wants, what's good for America, what's good for the world, etc., falls down. So what you have is you have lots of people building brick walls that are impenetrable, but you're not meant to be doing that. You're not meant to be walling yourself in. You're not meant to be building your own safety. You're meant to be going outside of what is safe for you and walking up the mountain. We'll get back to this every single time. And I think for me, I've got a major problem with how we interact as Christian congregation members with leaders, with especially worship leaders, with all the horrendous theology that goes on there, with all these different things. And we just basically soak it in. And we're like, why? Why is that? We're freaking lazy, bro. We don't want to think for ourselves. We want someone to think for us. Sometimes you're going to need an expert in an area. Like, I don't walk into, I don't know, like a head teacher's office and go, hey, I've never done education before in my entire life. This is how you should do it. No way. Also, you need to have a view about what should be done, especially if your kid goes to school. So my kids go to school, and I'm like, hey, I don't know the education system, never been a teacher, never been a head teacher, don't know the issues that you've got with like managing staff and curriculum and all the rest of it. But just so you know, we are going to be the ones that teach our children about different genders. And we're going to be the ones that teach our children about what marriage is. And we're going to be the ones that teach our children about spirituality, not your baby yoga classes. Just so you know. So I'm coming in with a view. I'm not telling them how to do their job, but I am saying I will not participate in some things. The problem that we've got is that that takes a lot of time and intensive thought, which really we're conditioned not to do, because we're conditioned to regurgitate information that we've heard.
And if
education systems or online or whatever it is. And so for me, there is equal responsibility on leaders and congregation members, people being led, to not let this thing become mental, which it has been and it has become.
Yeah.
Is that anything we're talking about? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think, I work in a functional medicine space sometimes. And one of the things that people struggle with is
functional medical space is just you admitting to be a drug pusher. That's okay. You just got to say it as it is, man.
Nah, a lot of times people have issues around their gut, right? And their gut is kind of it's called your second brain. So just a quick run through for people: your gut actually controls about 70% of your immune system. It controls 90% of your serotonin production, which is the happy chemical. It's the final filter, like getting toxins and waste out of your body, but also helps you absorb nutrients. If people have autoimmune, your gut's linked to the trigger for the autoimmune. pretty much all chronic diseases are metabolically driven. They're driven by chronic inflammation. So the gut plays a very central role in our health, right? And why am I
And
saying
please buy this drug.
no? Why I'm saying that is, well, I will say this. There's a guy in my church, and he was having, after the COVID vaccination, he was having a lot of like chronic sinus infections that he never had before. Like every like couple of weeks, you just get another one. I was like, Bill, are you taking any pro or prebiotics or anything like that for your gut? And he's like, no, why should I? And I'm like, yeah, I do like a soil or fungal based one. There's tons of stuff out there for that. Short version of story is he still till today will come up to me. He's like, I can't thank you. He's like in his 70s. I can't thank you enough. All I did was I take that one step. I have not had any sinus infections. Well, like, cool story, Bill. What's my point? My point is you said we're lazy. People are in like an absorption mode and they've not been activated. And again, this is one of the problems that we talked about before we even started recording is real leaders create more leaders. People who, and when I say real leaders create leaders, I'm not talking about the guys who sell courses online for thousands of dollars.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about somebody who will walk beside of you to the point where they're willing to work themselves out of a position so that you can be what they are to a degree. Jesus said, as the Father sent me, I now send you. You're going to do the same thing to me. So he's like, I'm demonstrating what leadership can be here, and I will work myself out of a job. And when we're in consumerism mode, what some people need before they go and try to climb the mountain is a colonic. They need like a Holy Ghost enema or something going on to like get some of that stuff out, because you have
the devil.
You have waste and toxins built up in your system that have blocked up the pathways, and so you can't absorb nutrition. One of the things that happens if you have too much waste and toxins in your body is your cell walls are normally open like this, and oxygen and nutrition will pass through. When it's inflamed, what happens when you roll your ankle? When you're playing football, your ankle swells, it gets bigger. So what happens? Your cell walls, they close. So now stuff from the body can't get in the cell. Things are soaking out body, and your entire body's made up of cells. So some of us have absorbed too much content. So I'm telling you, like you just mentioned, like the Jews going out into the wilderness, you need a spiritual colonic or enema. Get out, fast for a while, get it out of your system, and then do a hard reset of like, what should I be doing? Because we're conditioned to just, it's like that Wall-E film where all the people just got fat and they're like rolling around on like the things. They're not even walking anymore. And it's like, you're supposed to be a river, not a swamp.
And I'm having counselling at the moment, and I'm having support from my counsellor at the moment. And one of the things that we came to in our sessions was I can't do silence. I can't sit with silence. So he said to me, the challenge for you is that instead of when you are driving for work or whatever, of listening to a podcast, you need to sit in silence. Mm-hmm. Can you do that? And I'm like, but honestly, it filled me with anxiety. Mm-hmm. I'm like, I don't know what's going to go on in my head. What is going to go on in my mind in silence? It sounds, for some people, they're like, you're crazy. I'm like, dude, for someone like me, my mind is like that, and I love it. I love the idea that I can talk anything from like pre-millennial, like interpretation of Revelation through to like the 18th century and 1800s and Victorian. Like I love that. I love it, but it kills me because I am so constipated by my knowledge that I'm unable to filter through it to find out what's useful. And when I sit in silence, and also it's a block to hearing the voice of God and to a relationship with God. And I've got to be careful that my absorption of information doesn't just look like me perpetually eating from the tree of fruit, the tree of knowledge can be.
Do you feel like,
and I have to stay silent?
Do you feel like from your job, this like we can talk about some not you don't have to share details, but like with the work that you've done in the past, like working with the state. Like typically like first responders and police officers and people who see pretty horrific, awful things, they kind of get jacked into like a fight or flight where their cortisol is like up. And it's like a whole thing of like adrenal fatigue, but they don't know how any other way to be. Like that's kind of scary to like not do anything. Do you think that there maybe is an element of like you need like a nervous system reset where your nervous system just comes down to a baseline of
100%? But what I'd say is that I think I am better in my social work job than I was in ministry. Because
Well,
I think ministry for me was like what really triggered. Because I went through a whole healing journey process maybe 7 or 8 years ago. I came back into ministry, a specific sort of ministry, and it literally was. It played back into my dysfunction and celebrating my dysfunction of being constantly able to go. Massive capacity, can run really fast, really hard. I had a guy come around my house. It's a true story. A guy around 2 nights ago, and he said to me, "I'm in ministry. About to have a baby, about to have a child. Like you did ministry so well. Like you went to the gym, have the perfect family, all your kids are at church, your wife is there, etc., etc. Like, how did you do it?" And I was like, "Bro, everybody in my family died. So everything that you saw, not everything. Sometimes it was fun, but when you're talking to me about my example in ministry, I was like, dude, I had 2 nervous breakdowns. I was ill for 6 to 8 months every year,
Mhm.
and just had to just get on with it, and didn't have to, chose to get on with it. And I was like, dude, if you want an example for ministry, please don't choose me.
Mhm.
Please don't do that. And it was a massive thing for him because all this illusion burst for
Sure.
him, you know. And it was like, oh, he said at the end, he was like, "Oh man, now if I fail, it's okay, you know. Now if I can't do what you do, it's okay, you know." So yeah, so it's just a very interesting dynamic. But I would say yes, the cortisol is high, the adrenaline is high. I'm dealing a lot with sex offenders at the moment, and constantly on hypervigilance for children, and I can definitely feel it. I can definitely feel it. And even though you don't bring it home in your mind, you definitely bring it home in terms of like your body.
Yeah. I think it would be a difficult thing to turn off. Like obviously, like if you're a police officer, first responder, like what you're doing there, like where children are at risk, and that shifting gears basically, like being able to compartmentalize enough to be like good at what you do, but then like when you come back to like your life, um, being present and being your like a comprehensive version of yourself, I guess, um, is not an easy shift. And
No,
yeah, um,
There was a technical error on Tim's part. His mic died, and so we had to abruptly cut, but we'll follow up with another one. So I think the difference of what we were running at here between knowing about something and being formed by it is held in the tension of what Jesus said: you'll know the truth and the truth will set you free. And knowing the truth and experientially living the truth are two different things. I can know that I'm supposed to go to the gym and know what kind of food that I'm supposed to eat, and that's not actually what's changing my physique and my body. It comes down through living that out. And so we can consume quote unquote truth all day through clips and sermons and quotes and podcasts. But if there is no relationship to it, there's no correction, there's no cost, there's no walking that out experientially, it doesn't become any kind of authority in our life. It's just regurgitation of information. It just stays information. And that information doesn't transform you. It makes you feel like you're being transformed. It's a placebo, and that's a really subtle thing of buying self-help books and listening to self-help podcasts. It makes you feel like you're putting in the work to be changed, but you're simply not. So that pattern keeps showing up, whether we're looking at saints or church fathers or anyone who's actually walked this out. It's quieter, it's not glamorous, it's slow, it's relational, and it's grounded in humility and in being known as we are. Okay? And so there's a saying that God can't change the person who you're pretending to be, but he can change who you are if you admit to it. And so that's not something that's just followed. Okay? So the key takeaway here is, this is very simple, but not necessarily easy, is getting closer to something that's real, closer to people who actually know you, closer to practices that form you, closer to God, not as an idea, but as a person who you're willing to climb towards, even if no one sees it. And actually, especially if no one sees it, because then we know that there's not alternative motives with that. So we'll follow up with this podcast. We're going to keep going. But till next time, see ya.